Welcome to a conversation on spirituality and older adults. This presentation will address the unseen, perhaps unacknowledged aspects of spirituality and care for older adults. To do so, we're going to address 4 areas. First, we're going to address what it might mean to develop a shared concept. Second, we'll talk about how to access spirituality, not through a microscope, but through the wisdom traditions. As in most things, spirituality is primarily autobiographical, meaning not one size fits all. This is something that must be drawn out of the patient's experience. And then finally, we will address some organizing principles that help us with patient care and providing integration to the life events as well as their own wisdom and wholeness. When we think about developing a shared concept, the author in the book, Imperfect Spirituality, writes, "To be human is to be incomplete, yet yearn for completion. It's to be uncertain, and yet yearn for certainty. It's to be imperfect and desire perfection. It's to be broken, and yet to desire wholeness." In fact, it's that space between those two areas. And Dave Matthews, the musician, writes in this in the song, The Space Between. And so in doing this, we begin with developing a shared concept. In the Journal of Palliative Medicine, writes, "Spirituality is the aspect of humanity that refers to the way individuals seek and express meaning and purpose and the way they experience their connectedness to the moment, to self, to others, to nature, and to the significant or the sacred." Right out of the gate, we want to pay attention to the individualistic and the subjective aspect of this definition, meaning that spirituality is differentiated from religion. Spirituality is person-centered. It's derived from the millions of moments and experiences that each individual accumulates, some of them unfiltered, throughout their lives. It's the tool by which they make meaning. Pay attention now, as Polchewski writes in A Time of Listening and Caring, that religion is an objective and often codified expression of the deep spiritual beliefs of a specific group of people. And so oftentimes you'll find in religion that folks will gather together around similar meaning structures, similar experiences, and it becomes codified as a way of behaving and acting. That by nature is collective and specific. It's valuable to keep in mind that spirituality is always just below the surface of rite and ritual. In our current slide, you'll see a picture of the iceberg concept of culture. Now, culture is another thing that is hard to wrap our minds around. It reminds me of a story that was told once where there were 2 fish swimming in the sea, and as they were going along, another fish passed them by and asked the question, "How's the water, boys?" And after a minute or two, the fish looked at the other and said, "What's water?" So the idea behind this is that culture is so pervasive we don't even see it. It is the unfiltered accumulation of experiences, of wisdom, of insights, first from our parents, and they are always below sea level. They are always the things that drive our human behavior. And then just above that, there are all the unspoken rules that we experience, the way in which we engage the other, the way in which we identify our sense of meaning in our Western culture. Yeah, at the most surface level, we see the food and dress and music. And in each one of these, as they begin to lay themselves down, what we notice is the very low emotional load at the surface level. When you get a little bit below that, there's a very high emotional load. And finally, when you go down to the more unconscious aspects, there's a very intense emotional load. And so what this means in patient care is that all of this is present. Not only the physician's implicit biases and all of the experiences and unconscious and subconscious areas, the unspoken rules, but also to the patient. And so when these two interact, it's important for us to remember that what is not seen often matters the most. And so we say, well, what are the implications of such? Well, the first is that spirituality is found in all cultures and all societies. It's the means by which we reflect on who we are, who they are, and what does life mean. We often have to read through the religious expressions to discern our connection to deeper meaning. Viktor Frankl writes that the spiritual dimension cannot be ignored, for it's what makes us human. All of our presuppositions are present in every human encounter, often unaware to the patient, often unaware to the practitioner, but they always drive human behavior. And so how is it that we access these spiritualities, these aspects of the human dimension? Well, it's not through a microscope. It's more through the tradition of wisdom. Emily Dixon writes, tell the truth, but tell it slant. As lightning to the children eased, with explanation kind, the truth must dazzle gradually, or every man be blind. There's a truth that is experiential, that is subjective, that is unique to the person, that must be accessed in ways other than science and biology. They don't stand in juxtaposition against one another, but in spirituality, it's meant to be combined and in both. And so we talk about this in terms of a classification of knowledge. It really has more to do with ethics and philosophy rather than literature and science. And so the tools for insight may include contemplation, reflection, curiosity, always for the practitioner, a suspension of judgment, because the goal is self-awareness through acceptance. Wisdom tradition can employ art, music, experiences, emotions, literature, myths, legends, poetry, the sacred and sacrilegious, profane and profound. The hope and the promise, then, is for transformational growth through integration. It's the integration of life's events that promise wholeness for our patients. So when we talk about spirituality as autobiographical, it means that every culture in some ways is a culture of one. Because even though we might imagine that the patient sitting in front of you is a broad spectrum of folks that you've seen 100 times, their experiences and their interpretation of those experiences are uniquely different. And so it's helpful to begin a sense of understanding where we ask the questions, help them to answer even what gives their life meaning. How is it that you express that meaning? How are you connecting right in the moment? How are you connected even with your own self? Are you aware of the presuppositions that drive feelings and thoughts and behaviors? In what ways am I connected to nature or to people? What is sacred in my own life? And so, of course, we recognize that this is a tall task to get done in one visit. What I'm getting at is that these simply are always present. They're just always there. And in each one of these, almost on a regular basis, they are identified with doing, with work, with gaining, and with performance. And so when an older adult is present with you, chances are they have experienced thousands of losses along the way. They've been taught how to gain things. They've not been taught how to lose things or how to release things. And so if at first blush they might ask the question, what gives your life meaning? And they say, my work, my career. And then as they age, they phase out of that. There is an existential crisis, a dissonance that occurs. And so what is it that we do then around these realities? Well, we organize principles of spiritual care. We come from certain assumptions that help us get at what the patient is experiencing, because all of those unseen are driving patient behavior. Some of them is the notion that humanity is a contingent existence. By that we mean that nobody came into the world on their own. Imagine what it was like when your baby or you were first born. From the very beginning, you were taught that which is good, that which is bad, that which is lovely, that which is unsightly, right from the cues, from the facial expressions of your mother's face. Soon you learned how to behave and how to be, and that cultural experience, the family of origin, was significant in defining what you thought was good and right, how you saw yourself, how you saw the other, how you saw the world. And so it's a natural desire of humanity to participate and connect in communities that are safe and nourishing and compassionate. These aspects of human identity are meaning and connection. They are formed in those communities. But then what happens is disease, trauma, change, and loss, and they pose a threat to old meaning schemas. Who am I now? What happens now that I cannot work? What happens now that I'm no longer mobile? What happens now when I lose my license? It occurs when someone gets stuck and they are not able to integrate new events into previously held beliefs about themselves, the other, and the sacred. And so new meaning is blocked when self-preservation is sought through judgment and fear. Spiritual health, then, is the journey of integrating life's events into a cohesive, grace-filled story. Oftentimes, patients don't know how to do that on their own, and your acceptance and your kindness to them and you slowing down and just hearing more of their story creates that space that allows them to reflect. So how is it then that we organize these events into a grace-filled story? Well, certainly some of our modalities for spirituality include bearing witness. For the practitioner, that simply means being able to see and acknowledge the pain or the losses that their patient presents with. Sometimes it's contemplative practices, where the patient themselves is given space to reflect. There's Reiki and grief recovery and so many of these different aspects that are laid out here. Often the most important part is helping the patient come to a place of honoring their own narrative. See, there's always more that can be said. And what we've recognized in life is that it isn't just the event that frames our experience, it's the story we tell ourselves about that event. And so as patients open up and they're able to see and tell more of that story, it's a way of honoring it. And so as you engage your patient in a more holistic fashion, and their story is honored, and you bear witness to their experiences, one hopes for their own integration in spiritual health. And in fact, as you do this, the chance and opportunity for mutual transformation is for you as well. And so as a practitioner, our hope for you is that you and your patients gain more spiritual wholeness. Thank you.